Hi everyone, this is Alan McKay. Welcome to episode 141. I'm speaking with Adam Holmes, a layout supervisor for Sony Imageworks. Let's dive in.
Welcome to the Alan McKay Podcast. Alan is an Emmy Award-winning visual effects artist and mentor to many leading industry experts. Listen in as Alan talks with other industry leaders in film, video games, and visual effects about their experience, lessons, and methodology. Alan will teach you pivotal advice to fast-track your career, better your skills, and reach your ultimate dream job. Check out the latest episodes on alanmckay.com.
All right, so welcome to episode 141. I'm speaking with Adam Holmes, who's a buddy of mine. We go back to, I think, 2004 we met. We're sitting next to each other at DD at the time. I think working on, I can't remember anymore. We're working on a movie of some kind. And I just moved to LA around that time. So we go quite a while back. In such a small industry, I ended up working and hanging out with his brother in New York on the other side of the country years later for a good amount of time before I ever realized that they were actually brothers. So again, it's such a small industry. It's surprising. So I'm really excited to jump into this episode. Adam's worked for a lot of different studios over his career. Lucasfilm, Sony, Digital Domain. He also worked at Imagi, who I don't think is around anymore, but they did Ninja Turtles, the kind of CG animated feature film, like the 3D one a while back, as well as Disney and a lot of other places too. So Adam's got a lot of experience, and we get into some really cool stuff. I think for me, what I was really excited about chatting about was more to do with Superman Returns and negotiating to be a part of that production, which I thought was really cool, and just a lot of insights he shares into career advice and things like that too. So definitely a really cool episode. If you want to check out the show notes, go to alanmckay.com/141, so episode 141, and you can get all the quotes, the key takeaways, the insights that we share from this episode, as well as links to everything that we talk about. And on top of that, I'll just quickly mention I've got some free training that I've put out, which I'm really excited about at the moment. This is completely free. It's over 10 hours of high-end visual effects training. And this is on something that I put out a lot of different ideas that we all suggested. Like I had a lot of people suggesting different ideas for what they wanted. I had us all vote on it, and then I came up with the final one, which is a really cool visual effects shot. And I go through from start to finish the entire process of creating an entire visual effects shot and showcasing how to do that in 3D, compositing it as well, lighting it all, doing all the shaders, everything else, particles, fluids, you name it. So I think this is going to be really cool. And we also get into some other stuff. For me, I'm really excited about teaching artists to code, because I think that most of us think that, like, you know, I'm not smart enough to code, or coding's not for me, or, you know, whatever it is. And what I want to do is kind of teach artists to be able to learn to build their own tools and automate a lot of things and really benefit from that. So as a bonus in there, I've also put in some Python coding as well, and lots of other stuff to LiDAR scanning, and yeah, lots of cool stuff. So check it out. Go to alanmckay.com/energyball, and you'll be able to get access to it there. All right, so that is it for now. So enjoy this episode with Adam. Let's dive in. How did you start out? Did you always want to be an artist as a kid, or is it something that you kind of got into, you know, later in your career?
Yeah, I really always wanted to tell stories and make movies since I was a kid, you know, since seeing Star Wars when I was like 11 or 12 or something. So
That's awesome.
Been around a while, and that was certainly a heavy influence, just all those early you know, visual effects and, you know, space operas and sci-fi stuff, and, you know, everything, just the classic sort of. I watched stuff as a kid, and it had a big influence on me. So yeah, we made, you know, goofy movies in high school with our VHS cameras, and, you know, just tried anything we could at the time, because, you know, the technology just wasn't around. So you had
No, that's really cool, because yeah, it's funny whenever I ask that question, like on Facebook or Instagram or whatever, like, you know, what was the thing that got you started? It's for the more senior crowd and more experienced crowd, it's going to be Star Wars started it all. Otherwise, you get the next generation, which is, you know, it was Jurassic Park and Terminator 2, and I fall more in that category. And then finally, you got all the other stuff that started to catch up afterwards. So Iron Man, Lord of the Rings, and, you know, each generation. But yeah, there's always one or two of those films that just kind of, I guess, build that intrigue in all of us that make us say, like, whoa, I want to do that. No, it's really cool. And I guess for you, how did you first get started? I mean, obviously saying I want to do that, but like going from there to going on that path of
Right.
learning this stuff.
Yeah, it's everybody has like a unique journey, especially when you started out 20 years ago or more. I actually somehow got interested in computers, probably just through osmosis or something, and back then, the only thing around was like Apples and Commodores and really rudimentary computing system. So I saved up my paper route money, bought a Commodore VIC-20 for $100, and
Nice.
taught myself
Big keyboard.
programming.
That's also the computer.
Yeah, probably like 2K of RAM or some shit like that. But really, I think a real key was I was I was in a band. I knew music as well, and so I think music and math always go together. So to me, learning programming was actually pretty easy. But I just dove into it. I just absorbed everything I could about learning computers at that time, and then eventually graphics and things started coming out software wise, and got into 3ds DOS. And so that was
that your first 3D package?
Pretty much, yeah. Other people were like using Lightwave and some other rudimentary stuff, but as far as like a proper 3D package, it was 3ds.
There's one or two Lightwave people right now saying it was a proper 3D package, and it was, but just twisting your words. But that's cool. That's really cool. And I guess like actually just to touch on it for a second, because I'm always curious about this. You just said that you're doing a lot of music, right? And then so programming was easy for you. Is that what you said? Yeah.
Yeah. I think they just go hand in hand. So I think learning music as a kid and being really involved in that just I think helps that process, helps wire your brain to that. And I would recommend that for anybody now, if you're starting out, like learn programming. Like it's really useful in everything you do, at least just even understand how all this technology works that we get. You get an amazing plugin these days that can do anything with a push of a button, but how does it actually work?
Yeah, that's just exactly it. Like when you can actually automate a lot of the things you're doing. I always think if you got to do something twice, then you should be building a tool for it. But
and I do that almost daily or weekly at work as well. Currently, so it's to know, even if you're not a supervisor, but you can just make your life easier by designing tools like that. So
that's right. That's cool though, because there's so many people I've had on the podcast who said like they studied music, and because of that, picking up programming was so easy because of that structure. So yeah, I'm always fascinated by that. Me not having any musical ability at all, it's always like, okay, well, how does that help? So that's really cool. And yeah, I mean, going from there, I mean, again, for you, what was your first gig? And I always am curious about this because I feel like everyone is able to relate to like bits and pieces as we go along. But I mean, for you, having that intrigue and going down the path of learning 3D, especially that early, I mean, when were you able to put it to use? Was it a bit of a struggle to kind of get in the door, or was it enough studios around? You were in Chicago at the time, or where were you?
Yeah, I was in Chicago at the time. So I went to film school because I figured that, I could learn things on my own as far as software goes. Had a 386 computer, and you could do a lot of things at home on your own with manuals and learning. But learning film production and film theory and working with cameras and Steam Deck editing systems, you couldn't do that at home. It just wasn't available. And really getting sort of a proper film knowledge under my belt was a real goal. And so it was a bit of a struggle because I was kind of going down two paths. I was like, do I want to work on set and do live action stuff, or do I want to do full CG stuff, or how do I mix that together? The industry was just kind of coming up at the time. So yeah, it was a bit of a struggle because there wasn't a lot of opportunity unless you lived in LA or New York, but I kind of picked Chicago because I just loved it. Eventually there was some really opportunity at Big Idea Productions, which produced the VeggieTales series, the animated religious vegetable comedy, and
I'll have to check it out.
They had been going for almost 20 some odd years, and they actually just kind of wrapped it up. Like they got bought and sold a few times, but it was a long running show. And the really cool part about that was we were like the small group of people, all kind of from the same type of schooling. We're all like hungry to learn and do everything we can. And that was the time when Toy Story 1 first came out.
Yep.
And so we're doing our little thing with animated vegetables, and then you have like this amazing Toy Story movie, and we're all just so inspired by it. And from that, like all these people that I worked with are now like super high up heads at, Pixar and Disney and Blue Sky and Sony and, everywhere. So it was just this like breeding ground for incredible talent back then. It all came out of this little group in Chicago, which was really fun.
That's cool. Yeah, I love kind of looking at like where a lot of people have gone in their career, and it's pretty amazing. Like there's, I think we can all agree there's certain people that you worked with early on, and you just know that they're going to be doing whatever, and down the line they're going to blow up, and then yeah, it's kind of seeing where everyone's paths take them, and then there's some people who you think you're going to completely blow up, and they're like doing something completely different. But yeah, it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, and it was the kind of thing where, they were working with my school at the time, so there was knowledge about, hey, there's this company doing cool 3D stuff. And so, it's just like happenstance in a lot of ways. You're seeking out what you want to do. You have it in your mind. I want to achieve this goal, be this type of artist. And then, eventually you kind of run across the right opportunity and the right people to surround yourself with. I think it's having a good, goal in mind and doing whatever you can to achieve it. And eventually it comes to fruition.
I think it's kind of interesting too, because as you're saying, like, which do I do? Do I do 3D, visual effects, animation, whatever it's going to be in that category, or do I do live action set? Like, I love filmmaking, which one do I go down? And I think that, all of us have that aha moment later on in our careers where we realize anything creative, it's all the same genre. So just because I'm going down one avenue right now, which let's say is 3D, doesn't mean that I can't go and make a short film later. I can't be involved in filmmaking later. And who's to say where there's that defined line of like where one isn't the other. So I think that whether it's music, bridging into coding, like all these things, like they all kind of fit into the same universe, and you're just building or using all these different paintbrushes. Essentially, they're all different tools that help tell a story, help output your creativity.
I think you're absolutely right. And I think that, we shouldn't be, limiting ourselves just because you're a modeler, just because you're an animator or, whatever. Branch out and try new things, because I think that helps fuel what your main passion is anyway, And we used to do that back in the day. Like we were working like 80-hour weeks at Big Idea, on super slow computers that your phone is more powerful now than those things were. We were making short films on the side, and we were doing, creative things like that. Or running around and shooting something live action. And your passion fuels that. And I think you can cross-pollinate all those different talents, to any point in your career. You don't have to stop that.
Absolutely. And yeah, obviously we'll talk about it in a little bit, but I mean, that's exactly it. Like later on, you've had plenty of opportunities to go work on set. And then now again, you're doing 3D, but it's very heavily influencing the filmmaking process and getting to tell all the stories and be a part of that rather than it being, part of the post-production process necessarily. So yeah, I think that's really amazing.
And it's kind of cool. Like you see a lot of people coming into our realm of visual effects and animation who've never touched it before. So in the film I'm working on now, we had like a live action cinematography consultant. He's worked on like, mega movies and all this stuff. And you see that pretty often now, and it's kind of funny because we're so used to being involved in it for decades, and somebody comes in fresh, from a different, tangential industry, and they're like, "Whoa, this is so amazing," And it's just interesting to see that light in somebody's eyes where, we get a little jaded after a while. It still impresses people what we do, and that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and like I've worked with a bunch of DPs in New York, especially that. They're just coming from working in production, and we bring them in anyway into doing completely visual effects or 3D projects. And it's great because the art form's still there. Just because you're using different tools, they bridge over, or they're imitating exactly what you would do in real production. So it's kind of cool just to get someone who's honed their craft and been able to then apply it to a different medium that, allows you to create the same kind of vision. It's awesome.
And more to that point, I started to focus my career around cinematography because I really love that as far as storytelling, visual storytelling through that. And I tend to, when I'm training somebody who's coming up, maybe a junior artist or whatever, and I try to really instill that traditional filmmaking terminology and style and all the things that we know inherently because we've done that. We held a camera, we picked it up. It's not getting taught as much these days, or maybe you don't have much experience, doing that, but it still influences what we do, like you're saying. So I think it's important to know where it all came from, because all that terminology and creative inspiration is still coming from those areas. It's like saying that you may be a Photoshop artist, a master, but if you don't know how to like actually paint and pick up a pen, you're not, it's not really the same. So I try to do that.
No, that's awesome, man. And just curious, like, so going from big idea, like for you, where do you think it was like the first place you went where you kind of felt like, okay, like this is, I've made it. This is like what I want to do, and where you kind of got that big break.
I guess it's kind of a mix, because I was going into like doing visual effects, which is where we met, at Film.
I think the first time I met you, I think, was actually at Digital Dimension.
Digital
Dimension. I was there doing a quick stint before I went back to Australia to work on my visa, but would have been Cinderella Story, I think.
Yeah. But I think it was maybe just after that. So working and doing visual effects, and then doing a fair amount of previs for live action visual effects work. And that was all great. I really, that was a great experience. But then when this company Imagi came up, it was based in Holmes, but they had an LA office, and my friend got the gig to direct the animated Ninja Turtle movie. And so we put this really, cool team together, and it was very small, and we were just like making up cool stuff literally in the basement of a building and, in the valley in California. And I think that was probably the point where I was like, okay, cool. This is exactly what I want to do. Like we're shooting this movie, but it's all, a small team creative thing. It's not this big, corporate machine sort of thing. And it was just kind of that, a lot of creative freedom. And I think that was really that point where it felt like, okay, that's really what I want to be doing now, after doing all this other stuff before and kind of figuring out
cool.
It led. So
yeah, I don't know if you remember this or not, but like there was one night, like I flew in from Australia, and I was at a bar with a bunch of friends from all over the place, and I was at King's Head in Santa Monica, and I was actually talking about you, and I turned around, you were literally standing behind me with all the guys from Imagi. It's just like, oh shit, like small freaking world. I guess this shit happens all the time.
Yeah, of course.
But that's cool. And like prior to that, I mean, yeah, you were working at DD, Frantic, a few things like that. Like, what was the first feature that you worked on?
Like feature Frantic. Oh man, it was probably like Freddy versus Jason.
Oh right. I watched that the other day again for the first time in like a long time. But that was the first movie premiere I ever went to, was that movie, and I still remember walking onto the parking lot. And I remember saying to a few of the guys with me, that was actually a really good film, except like the boyfriend, that guy was terrible. And I looked over, and he's waiting to get picked up, by his friend or whatever. And so he heard me, and I'm like, looked over, I'm like, oh shit, should have probably said that so loud. But that was a pretty fun one.
Yeah. Luckily after that though, they got the gig to do a lot of effects for Elf, the Will Ferrell movie.
Yeah.
And it's really stood up, and it's such a popular film that it's really a film, and we had a lot of fun making all these snowball effects and a lot of green screen stuff, and everybody knows when you say, oh yeah, I worked on that snowball scene where they're all chasing the bad kids and all that stuff, and that was awesome. That was really fun, and that like doing visual effects for something that you really enjoy. Not a lot of times you work on a movie and you're like, oh, it's kind of like a kind of thing, but you're doing it because it's your job. But when you can get those come few and far between, but something like that I think was really satisfying for sure.
I was really fond of that team. Like that was at DD back in 2003. Like just all the people there is just such a rock solid team of talented people at the time. And yeah, I mean, it's a shame that it didn't last, but yeah, I mean, the projects they were doing, just everything lining up over those couple of years, like 2003, 4, and 5, I think were pretty fun times.
Yeah, and I think that that kind of built up to working at Frantic, who were doing other bigger movies, and then we talked earlier about the whole Superman Returns project, and that was probably the next big one, I think, where it was like, oh, okay, cool, this is like a big movie, and you have to come up with some big effects, and you have to come up with something that people hadn't seen before, and so we did about a year of previs.
That's right, for McG.
Yeah, for McG.
So do you want to tell a bit about that story? Because I feel like there's two separate Superman movies, but do you want to talk a bit about McG and then why maybe that movie went away, and then the singer
Well,
version.
it's one of those things like that particular property. They've been trying to make that movie for about 10 years with several different directors, and I met people working on there that had
It's totally cursed.
worked with all these different directors. All the goofy stuff that came out of that. But McGee was awesome. Like as far as an interesting cat, like very visual, very action. Michael Bay-ish in a way, but not Michael Bay, I guess. And he had just an immense amount of energy like that I've never seen somebody have. Hopefully it wasn't the drugs or anything. I'm sure it's just like he's so passionate about what he does, and we'd show him the previous stuff we're doing. He just would get so excited and inspire more and more ideas. And fortunately, a lot of the big action sequences were kept in Bryan Singer version. So the whole
or at least the plane, yeah,
into the
accordion.
That was all we designed all that a couple years before it was actually made, and they was like, okay, we already paid to develop all this stuff, but just stick it kind of in this other version of the movie. And it was the difference between McGee wanted to do more of a big action, kind of Guardians of the Galaxy kind of feel, and then Bryan Singer.
He wanted to do a stalkerish movie where he pretty much spies on her and doesn't talk the whole time. But yeah, I mean, yeah, like I didn't have anything to do with the film, but I was around at the time, and that's just it. Like, it sounded like that movie was just completely action oriented. It sounded like I would have preferred to have seen that movie. Then, like, I remember when Superman finally came out, because I was on that project just like you for a long time. I was on it for about 2 years, I think, or a year and a half, and yeah, that I remember everyone wanted to see it with me when the movie came out, and I fell asleep literally in the opening titles the second time around, just because it was just, I couldn't stand it. It was terrible, but visually it looks great. It's just it wasn't the same as what it could have been. And and I guess with McGee, I mean, the story of like why that project went away, right?
For him? Yeah, well, they were trying to get him to shoot in other places.
Australia. They wanted to shoot in Sydney as well.
New York, and he basically refused to go scout and go there and do anything there. They had like a plane fueled, and he's like, I'm not getting.
Yeah, no, they literally he was on the tarmac with them, and all the Warner Bros. Execs go to board the plane, and like an hour and a half go by, and he's still in the limo, and he's just like, "Yep, I haven't told anyone, but I've actually got a fear of like leaving the United States." And since then he's got in a lot of therapy, and he's now able to go to Canada and a few places that are still continental, but yeah, like it was actually a thing that he couldn't leave the States, and so there was all the "you'll never work in Hollywood ever again," which I feel like you haven't made it in LA until you've been told you'll never work in Hollywood ever again. Then it's like, yes.
Funny tangential story was, you remember the Kevin Smith where he did the
we could spend hours on this, and I don't mind. I'm happy to do it, but it's just funny because like Chris Bond would tell me all the stories, but yeah, go ahead.
Oh yeah, it was just funny because Kevin Smith had a whole story about working on Superman when he did it, and then working with the producer John Peters and how he wanted this giant spider in it, and that whole thing, whatever. And then when I actually met John Peters and went to his house in Malibu for a party or whatever, I was like, okay, this is exactly how this guy described him, this wacky producer, just, eccentric kind of thing. It was just so surreal because like when you're in Hollywood, these things just sort of happen when you're working out. You get invited to a producer's house in Malibu, or you meet these movie stars, or you hear all these different stories, and they're like, oh yeah, that's actually how it is there. It's really strange, but it's so like opposite your normal existence, when you're just like a guy from a small town and wanted to make movies,
I learned that very quickly. I literally, in the first few weeks of moving to LA, where Rob Shazer, right, producer. Yeah, so I remember like being in a room and telling the story of like Weta and the first Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring, and how like New Line, came by and basically lined everyone up and screamed at him, and like all the kind of friction that was going on during the first Lord of the Rings. And Rob was really quiet, and after a while I kind of looked at him and I started to remember him mentioning he used to work at New Line, and then I'm like, you were one of them, weren't you? And he's just like nodding, like, yep. I was like, okay, so here's the other side of the story, but that's just it. Like you realize how small the industry is, and at the same time, the perspectives of a project, and there's always going to be two sides of it. Right. But Superman, I mean, there's so many fascinating stories around that. Like one brilliant idea, someone not directly related to the film who had a lot of influence on the movie at one point wanted Superman to lose his cape so he couldn't fly for half the movie, and it's just like, it's not quite how it works. And then there's the one where I think it's Zod's son comes down to Earth, and then they have a big fight, but because they're both superhuman, the way that it was pictured would be there'd just be two regular people fighting. So instead of being like the Matrix, just some over the top thing, it's just like, no, it's like two people having a fist fight, which and there's so many more. Of course, I've forgotten the character's name, but essentially Superman comes down, he's got radiation and he's half mutated, and he's got one big arm, one small arm, which apparently is a character. I learned so much about Superman just from being on the project, and I guess I didn't really know much before that. But
it's pretty strange. The other cool part of that experience was then, after the whole blow up and Bryan Singer took over, and they kind of went at obviously a different direction. Different companies took over a lot of work. Frantic ended up doing a lot of the work, and then it got cut out. But that was a point where I had this opportunity, or trying to make this opportunity where to go work on the set, and it eventually worked out that I could go down there and kind of intern away and work with the camera department, the DPs, the visual effects guys.
With Thomas Siegel and all them.
Thomas Siegel and Ross Emery and some amazing people there in Sydney. And I learned so much about, working on a giant movie set like that, where they're burning millions of dollars a day, doing this stuff, and how they
burning $1 million a day waiting for Bryan Singer to shake off his hangover and come into work.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. When I got there, they were still trying to find him. He was gone for a week, disappeared.
No, we did an estimate at one point of how much combined I think we were losing per hour from him not being on set, and I think it was $150,000 for Rhythm Hughes, Sony, Frantic, and everyone else. And it's just, he loves the party, that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, and the interesting part about that is how how live action is made. You can physically see this money getting wasted, and in CG you don't. It's behind a closed door. It's in a room of computers. And we're sort of artists. We're nameless, faceless. People just sitting in an office, whereas on set you can see, there's truck drivers, there's construction people, there's, the catering, like all this stuff. And I think that it's the same problem, waste is waste. And whether it happens during a live action shoot, or, you're redoing the animated scene for the 100th time because they can change their minds, that waste is a huge issue in what we do. And it's trying to be, as we do our work, trying to be that's a big difference, because you can just
right.
see it.
And being on set too, I mean, the difference is that, and I guess we'll probably get into this in a moment too, but with visual effects, there is certain things set in stone about being paid hourly and time and a half, double time, but it's not what is meant to be practiced isn't always executed. And with film though, like as soon as you go in overtime, like everything blows up, because the set that you're on, you're only allotted a certain amount of time, let alone every single person on there. So typically everyone's unionized and in a guild, and because of that, it means they're protected. So you don't want to go in overtime, because as soon as you do, it's going to literally double the cost in no time at all. And that's when you really got to, light the fire into the butts and get going. Whereas with visual effects, you're right. Like I remember even going back to Superman, you would have Bryan Singer prevising, typical conversation between people. You'd have, dialogue shots, and you're prevising that, which up until that point wasn't really a thing, because usually you're trying to previs really complicated, visual effects or camera moves or whatever it's going to be. But when you're suddenly using it more of as a luxury, it's just like, how much time and money are you burning? But it's not quite the same. You have that luxury in post, whereas you don't necessarily on set.
Yeah, and there's a difference between using it as a tool to come up with, creative ideas versus a crutch. Like I can do it just because I can. It's about using that tool like Previs for something that is actually worthwhile and serving the purpose of the movie and the story, versus just doing it.
That's right. Yeah, I guess no one's got the balls to say like, "Come on, man,
Yeah.
how many times do you want to shift the camera?" But yeah, that's really cool. And like, do you want to talk a little bit about that, like how you went from, let's say, working in 3D in LA to being able to negotiate and come down to Sydney? I'm just curious because I mean, again, like for you, let's say back in the beginning, wanting to work on set and potentially go that avenue, like there is always a bit of a bridging over from one to the other. And I think that again, it is always interesting to be able to have those goals and actually make them happen, and having that hustle to get to where you want to be.
Well, I think it's a matter of just like setting a goal. Like I wanted to have that experience that you just can't get any other way. You can't just like, oh, I want to work on a giant movie set. Like it just doesn't come to fruition unless you sort of plan that out. But some of it's a bit of luck, but I think it's also making the right connections. And so when you're in whatever position you're in, is trying to figure out, okay, I want to do this. How can I get there? What are the right connections I need to make that happen? So it could have easily just not have happened as well. Somebody could have said, no, that's not going to work, or we can't do that, or whatever. But I think just being persistent and being honest and being a genuine like being a cool person, not being an asshole, really help. People respond to being nice.
Need a T-shirt that says "not an asshole."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's my motto. I don't work with assholes. But also, like being a bit humble. Like I had a lot of experience, from visual effects and animation and all that. But going to working on live action sets and stuff, I was like, okay, I'm the new guy. I don't know anything. Like I did, but it was like not to the level these people do who do it day in and day out for years and years and years. So it's kind of like, okay, I'll take a step back and I'm going to learn from you. And that was really part of the goal as well, is continuing my film education by doing that. And think, okay, yeah, I'm just going to run around and lift camera boxes all day long. I lost a lot of weight, which was awesome, but you still learn. You learn by observing. And for me, even if there wasn't anything particularly cool for me to do, because certain people had their jobs and you couldn't do their job, but it was like just observing, just being there and watching and seeing all these different people do on a set and why they make the decision. So I would kind of put it in my mind like, okay, if I was the director, if I was the DP, if I was the visual effects suit, what kind of decisions would I be making live right there as they're doing their work? And you see like, oh, whoops, if that were me, I made the wrong decision. Oh, I made the same decision he did. Okay, cool. And you can see why that happens. Just observing and having that mentality of learning every second, I think is key for that.
It was pretty cool. Like I remember walking on set a few times. You have like Richard Branson was doing a cameo. He was like flying. Oh no, he was the pilot, wasn't he? Flying the plane. Yeah. Because I remember at the time, like I just walked in on a lunch break, and yeah, it looked like a space scene, but then it's like, oh yeah, 10 years later it clicks. Yeah, but
because that was when Bryan Singer was there, and yeah, Richard Branson was coming in the whole thing, and Bryan Singer's parents, and then he just starts yelling at his writer, like for some reason he didn't like what the writer had put in the script that day or whatever, and he just like threw the screen in front of the whole crew, which Branson is, told the writer, get the fuck out of here and go fix that script. It's just like classic Hollywood nonsense.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just funny, that movie. Like out of every project I've worked on, that's one where the stories you can never run out of. Even Kevin Spacey stuff is just like, yeah, this is like 10 years later, and all these things are going around. It's just like, oh, people didn't know, like, but yeah, I mean, it's definitely a cool project. Like for you, what were some of the things that you got from, like, what were the key takeaways that you were able to apply, like going back stateside?
Well, I think it was really seeing how what we did in Previs to visualize artistically and technically how an action scene would go, and then seeing how that played out in real life, what they had to do to make it happen, what kind of plates they needed to shoot, what kind of compromises they needed to make in order to get the shot in the time they needed to get the shot with the schedule and the budget, and what things you kind of had to let go. And like the whole fix and post thing, there was a reason for that, because one at a time, people get tired, they have to go on to another project, and so I think you get a broader understanding of how this whole big process comes together, because you can be sitting at your desk like, oh, why didn't they shoot this plate so well, or why did they do it the way I would have done that way? Well, unless you were there, you don't really understand. You
Yeah.
don't see what goes into it. And I think it's good for everybody, I think, to have that sort of experience, because then it makes you appreciate what you do more. Because it is a collaboration, even though you might not physically be there on the set or have anything to do with the live action part, but you're still collaborating with those people.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, and it is interesting too, because I mean, there's so many times where you see like a terrible visual effects shot, let's say, and for me, before I start judging, I'm always curious to see what the story is, because, you know, just because the shot isn't executed well doesn't mean that's necessarily the visual effects people that made that decision. It could very well be, you know, the other way around. So I mean, there's always a story.
Yeah, I mean the things they constructed, the gimbal rigs to make the plane move with 40 people in it, like some of that stuff is just unbelievable what they make in real life.
And then you have two people flapping Superman's cape.
Yeah, right. Well, it was funny because originally they were working with a guy that did the original Superman like puppeteering and stuff back on the old films, and he had this little finger rig where it would it was a little mechanical thing on his back, and it would wiggle the cape, or the puppet's cape. And so they made a human-sized version of this little finger rig that he could control and would flap the cape, but it didn't work. It looked terrible. So they had to go with like little people in green ones on a green screen, manually puppeteering the cape. And then I think a lot of it got just erased and redone in CG anyway.
Yep. Exactly. That's cool. That's really cool. And I guess from there, like, when you headed back, like, what was the next thing you took on right after that?
Well, that was the Ninja Turtles film right after that, the whole Imagi experience. And, that was kind of like, okay, I'm going to, try and take, some of this really awesome live action experience and start to apply it more towards the CG film. And that's how we made that film. But the way we shot TMNT was very live action-y. And so kind of rolling off this experience working on this giant movie set with, that type of workflow and those types of, visual elements, kind of trying to put that into a CG movie, where a lot of the CG movies at the time, this is back in 2005, weren't really doing that. They were very generic in their cinematography.
Yeah, in 2005, you would have had Beowulf coming out and a few things like that. No, it's kind of interesting because Imagi was really cool, and like I never got to see it, but I really liked they'd done Astro Boy right before that, then TMNT, and just kind of giving a new style to these kind of older things that we all associate with, and kind of rejuvenating them. I was really excited about that, so I think that was really cool.
Yeah, they were kind of focused on that. We actually did Turtles first, and then
it was the other way around. Okay,
it was a different team. I didn't work on it, but
screw those guys.
Yeah, no. we were developing Gatchaman, which was this Japanese property, which had an American title called Battle of the Planets, and it was kind of like,
that still sounds like a Japanese title. Sorry.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. But, it was of that genre of Power Ranger-y kind of action stuff. These action heroes in these bird costumes that would transform, and all the space and all that stuff. And so that we were going down that road of these action sci-fi CG things that were really taking a clue from all of the big live action visual effects movies and stuff, and trying to apply that towards CG films. And that was really exciting to do, except then we went bankrupt.
Yeah, it's the tricky part always, like, especially back then. I think that, like, that is just before the big recession, like, visual effects were definitely getting hit pretty hard. I think that VFX definitely has those dips, and around like 2005, 2006 was one, and then again I think around 2012. So there's a few kind of, even when I first moved to LA in 2003, like there was a couple of those going on. So I mean, it's definitely one of those things that's kind of worked its way up, but there's always been that fluctuation, in between.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it was. There were certainly some gaps in employment.
But you were so you were working in Digital Domain for a while too, right? So you're working on the Thundercats project.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we did a really cool test. Warner Brothers was going to do a full CG Thundercats movie. They had a really cool guy who came from video games, who directed video game cinematics, who directed And we put together a small team. We did a really cool trailer. It somehow leaked on YouTube, so you can watch
How many people were working on that? Because I was chatting with Simon Eves. He, I think, wrote helped write the engine for that. But he showed me some stuff like years ago before it was ever leaked. But yeah, there's a few other people. I'm trying to think of who it was. But how big was the team for that project?
Oh shoot, not big. I would say 40 maybe.
Okay.
Because they were writing this real time, rendering. I could say quotes real time, but nothing like you can do on Unreal now. But it was back then. It was like you had barely a gig graphics card, and you were trying to process like maybe a frame per second, fully lit and anti-alias and everything. And it was amazing. They were, Kim Laberry was the main.
Oh, Kim, yeah, of course.
And, he was just like pushing to get this, technology that was really ahead of its time for sure. So we did this mocap, and then we translated in, and of course you animate on top of that. But it was this whole like very fluid, pre-busy animation mocap thing all going on at the same time, and then trying to render it in real time. And yeah, it was super cool. I was bummed it didn't happen, but like anything, those companies do those kind of tests, and they help fuel the next level of technology from there.
I love the fact that there was like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles CG feature, Thundercat CG feature, Astro Boy CG feature. It's like someone's got my childhood and just decided to make it into animated feature films. But yeah, I mean that would have been a fun IP to kind of go after at the time for sure.
Yeah, it was really awesome. Great team, and I hadn't worked at DD before, and it was just super impressed with what they were able to do, and still do. I got some buddies that work here in Vancouver at the DD branch here, and they just do some amazing work.
That's really cool. And I think one of the last times I caught up with you, you were at Lucasfilm. So like, what were you at? Big Rock, or where were you?
Yeah, Big Rock Ranch. Yeah, so it was one of those just random things where my director friend from Ninja Turtles, Kevin Monroe, got the call from Lucas. Hey, we're doing this CG, movie about fairies, and it's a musical. What do you think? And he was kind of like, I don't know about that. But he went up and interviewed and held the whole thing, and eventually it was like, yeah, this could be really, really cool. So he got the gig, and then he's the type of guy, like really, really genuine, one of the most genuine people I've ever worked with. And he'll just he calls his buddies and be like, hey, you want to come work at this? I'm doing this movie at Lucasfilm, and we were all like, yes, sign me up. I want to do that. And it was literally one of the best gigs I can say I've ever worked at. Awesome people, like just that whole mystique about Lucasfilm is really awesome. And it was probably different than, maybe people had experiences working at ILM, which is totally different than what Lucasfilm was doing. We're a bit separated from that.
Yeah, they're very different companies. Like I've noticed, just to jump into it, but like I noticed that there are people even within those companies that aren't necessarily too aware how separated they can be. But I mean, one is a vendor that's creating visual effects. It's a visual effects service for other filmmaking companies, and then you've got Jack Films and Big Rock and all these others that are specifically and exclusively about creating intellectual property for the Lucas empire. So yeah.
Yeah, it was kind of like I actually met George a couple of years before that randomly. I had a friend, and they were
You're buying ice cream one day, and
yeah. A random friend was shooting some video for the Grand Prix race that they do there, and is it down in California, not Santa Monica, is it Long Beach Grand Prix. And they have a celebrity pit, so they have a celebrity race before the actual main race. And so they had like, Hugh Hefner was the grand marshal. One of his girlfriends was driving in the celebrity race. You had some like TV personalities, sports personalities, and then they're like, oh, there's George Lucas. He's going to be driving this race, because originally he wanted to be a race car driver. He wasn't a filmmaker. He wanted to be a race car driver out of high school or college.
What did he not want to be? Because he wanted to be an architect. He wanted to be so many things.
Yeah,
was he riding a pod racer, or what was he trying?
Yeah, I know. But he's in his full jumpsuit and everything, and we just go there and we do a quick interview with him and stuff. I was like, I don't know if I'll ever meet this guy ever again. Got a cool picture.
Oh, that's awesome.
Cool. It was really fun. But then, fast forward like 3 years later, I'm working for the guy at his company making this CG movie. So cool. It was just one of those things. Like, and again, just, back to the whole connection thing, and working with people that you like to work with and they like to work with you. You help yourself go places. And, it was just through that kind of relationship and working hard together and, making good movies together, having fun together at the same time. And that person gets opportunity and takes you along with them for the ride, and also being open to that. I guess I've been able to move around and travel and have that opportunity, and that helps too. You have to be open to the opportunities. And, like you've lived many different places, and you move for the work, and you love it. But that was a really good opportunity to jump on. I was really happy I did that.
Mm. No, yeah, you're absolutely right, and I think that's the cool thing too, is that I always hear a lot of people saying like, I have to move to this city or this city because of I need to get work. But the good thing is that the more that you work, the more connections you build, the more opportunities you create for yourself, the more you can choose where to work. And I think for a huge stint of my career, I was less serious about the work I was doing and more choosing jobs based on the location. So I'd be like, oh, I'll go to New York, oh, I'll go to Berlin, I'll go to Vancouver. And it's, I think that we all can have that, where it's like, well, why don't I make this opportunity work for me rather than it being in reactive mode where you're literally being told where to go. Like, I've got to go to Vancouver because of whatever. It's like, well, why not make it your opportunity? And as you were talking about Victoria just earlier, you could always say, well, screw it. Maybe I can go and live in the vineyards or Victoria Island or wherever it might be, Burnaby, some surrounding area that's more my pace, or commute from Seattle every day if you want to do a 2-hour drive. But yeah, I mean, that's just it. Like, the world's your oyster, and we have all the tools and technology now that you don't need to necessarily move to. You can have your remote office somewhere and do all the work there, have a cloud rendering, have whatever you need to make it all work for you.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. It's taking the ownership of your career and trying to make it work. There's certain things you have no control over, obviously, but
yeah, if you're doing a Marvel movie, then doing it over the cloud might be a bit different.
Yeah, but it's part of the also mentality thing, as you're saying. So that if you're treating it not like, oh, I have to do this, I have no control over what's going to, flip it on its head. How can you make this best for you? Kind of thing.
Absolutely. No, it's completely it. And that's just it. Like, why not treat it like an adventure? Because you are going to get those personalities where like everything is just like, oh, I got to go do this. But it's like, fuck it. Like, this is a chance to go to New Zealand. This is a chance to go to Sydney. This is a chance to do exciting things. And how many people have those opportunities to be a part of all these things? So yeah, I think that we are in an exciting industry where we get to be creative. We get to do all these fun things and be a part of a huge experience that everyone gets to enjoy.
Right. Kind of backtracking a little bit related to that topic. When I worked at Big Idea, I was there for like 3 years doing the detail thing stuff, and I was still very kind of interested in software development and all the cool stuff going on, and so I made these connections with the Autodesk, the local Autodesk people, because they were really interested in trying to get more of their technology into our studio. And so I was kind of helping do some demos and testing out stuff, how it would work in my workflow, and I was still very excited about 3ds Max and all that stuff. And then it came to a point where they approached me and said, hey, you seem to really know what you're talking about. You know the software really well, you can articulate it, you're demoing this stuff and trying to figure out workflows and processes, and well, we got a position here. You could, be the demo guy, and you can travel around and work with clients and stuff. I was like, that actually sounds like a good idea. And it was, again, that sort of thinking about a different type of opportunity, but still within our industry, instead of being like, well, I'm just that guy in the cube making some cool stuff, making some cool effects and whatever. But what about traveling? What about, meeting people doing different things, architects, engineers, game developers, and it was all like that time of the industry, everything was just popping. So many new things were coming out. And so, for me, it was like getting this amazing opportunity to go travel the world, meet everybody in the industry that's doing the coolest stuff, and, work the trade shows, SIGGRAPH and GDC and all that stuff, that you've done as well. And you can attest to that. Like, it just opens up so many opportunities. So it's kind of one of those things that you might think, well, I'm working in the sales department for a software company. That sounds awful, but I turned it on its head like that. I said, how can I make this? Yeah, it's like making these connections and learning as much as I can about how this whole industry works. And so that was probably another big point where that as far as career influence goes.
Mm-hmm.
And to this day, my best friends are still, like ex-Autodesk people, and they're working at NVIDIA and AMD and, all these cool technologies. And so, if you get the opportunity to do something like that, I think it really helps because, it just helps bridge the connections.
Yeah, definitely. There's so many friends of mine who've gone and worked at Discrete and Autodesk and had these positions, and then get to meet all the studio heads, all the decision makers at companies, and then when it comes time for them to leave, like they've got all these opportunities and they've got all these connections with people that you probably wouldn't have direct access to if you were coming in as an artist. And I've always thought about that too. Is just if you want to build connections quick, getting FaceTime with like all these people who are high up in the company, who are typically making the decisions about the growth of the company, what tools they're going to use, all of these different things, and they're typically speaking to you about how can we expand our team, how can we get things done on time, what can we do better. It gives you a really influential chance to have that time with them.
And it was really cool because like working with the developers of 3ds Max, like you were able to influence how the product worked, and we were also taking feedback from clients. Oh, this doesn't work, this is really annoying, how do we make this? And then you're actually helping artists do their job better
Mm-hmm.
by doing that. That was really, really satisfying, for sure.
That's really
probably
cool.
Probably the best part was meeting Sean Steiner, though. That was getting the pregnant with that guy was like epic. So
yeah, Steiner's really awesome. Like all those guys are really great. Actually, Fred Ruff, he's just down the street from me. So like, because I always put Frank DeLeese and Fred Ruff in the same category because like they were working there forever, and he's at Portland doing Refuge VFX. And my neighbor across the street, we're on a webcam, so I'm gonna turn it right there. You can kind of see there's a house right there at my window, but it's hilarious. Like there's one of the head product managers for Autodesk is across the street from me. So I thought it was really funny when, everyone in the street's like, oh, new neighbor in town, better go introduce ourselves. And most of my streets all Nike and Intel. And then one person's like, oh, I work for Autodesk. And I just kind of started snickering a little bit like, what a coincidence,
Yeah, we all remember each other. Yeah. Say hi to Fred. We have the same birthday, actually, on St. Patrick's Day. So.
Oh, that's really awesome. Yeah, I will. We haven't seen each other for a couple of weeks, so I'll definitely have to hit him up for some beers. Yeah. He's a good guy. So that's really cool. And like, again, just to jump around a little bit, but obviously after Lucasfilm, I mean, you've worked on and off with Sony in one shape or form for quite a long time. And like now you're in Vancouver rocking things out there. I mean, what's your relationship been or your experience been with Sony over the years?
I worked on a couple projects in the Culver City version, G-Force, which is the spy guinea pig movies, and then characters, and then the first Alice in Wonderland. And so we had a really cool small layout team there who, a lot of these people have worked on, tons of their other movies, a lot of the animated stuff like Cloudy with Chance of Meatballs and Surf Stop and all that stuff. So it was a bit different down there, but Sony has always put a lot of effort into doing layout and how the cinematography aspect of it and, scene blocking and figuring out, action and character and everything. They've been very focused, I'd say, like almost a Pixar level in that respect. They treat it with a lot of respect, which is great. So I really honed in on that aspect of Sony, which was really cool. And then, so coming back to Sony in Vancouver, it really presented that same kind of opportunity. They were growing the layout team here to do, both the live action and effects movies and full CG movies that we're doing. And so, it was just kind of a great opportunity to jump back into that company and see how far they've gone. And same kind of thing. We're building some great, technology with what we're doing with the layout department. We have like a new, Vicon motion capture system we're starting to incorporate and stuff like that. And layouts, it's growing massively here. So just in general in the area, like all these different studios are putting a lot in because they realize that it helps the movie, it helps the budget, it helps the storytelling, it's everything. It's the
foundation of the whole film.
Yeah. So it's been really great coming back to them and again, I'm working in software development for them, helping figure out new tools and things, and then also growing the teams. And yeah, it's really fun. Like I really feel it's more of a home now than it ever was, for sure.
That's cool. And I guess like in the current position you're in, I mean, what's the typical day-to-day that you're running?
Well, it's working with the client, in this case Warner Brothers. It's a lot of remote work. So our client's in LA, the director, the editorial, the story is all done there. And then up here, it's, we're doing layout, we're doing the animation, the effects, and everything else of the movie. So that remote aspect is challenging, but it's something that I've kind of been prepared to do. Like, when we did Ninja Turtles, we were working remotely with Hong Kong, on a really different time scale and, time warp when you're doing that type of work. But it's easier here because you're working with LA, we're on the same time zone. So, we're working, very closely with the story and director on how we're making the movie. So we have a lot of reviews, every day about sequences and how we're putting these sequences together. And we generate a lot of ideas back and forth. And that part of the creative process is really exciting because it's very fluid. And we get to come up with a lot of really cool ideas and sort of pitch those to the director and see what sticks. And that's just part of the filmmaking process that we do in layout. It is very exciting, and you get a chance to really put forth some stuff that might actually end up in the movie, which is pretty cool. So the other side of it is it's also very quite technical. So it's taking the work we do in our department and passing that down to the animation department and effects departments and other departments. So you have to make sure all the data, moves smoothly through the system. And so he has an incredible pipeline, and it's rock solid, and it's amazing. So part of it is that creative aspect. I might be working on shots. I might be helping other people work on developing their sequences, and then, working with the directors and everybody, figuring out the more global picture of what's going on. And then it's like, okay, now we do all this work. How do we make sure it actually, comes out the other end properly?
Yeah.
So it fuels both sides of what I like to do. I'm kind of, I'm kind of that split of 50-50 creative and technical. So I think it gives me that satisfaction of both those worlds.
That's really awesome. I mean, yeah, I always find that, either doing more concept illustration for films and very much so for doing previs and animatics. I mean, you're at the very beginning of the whole workflow. You're working with the director. You've got a lot more creative influence than a lot of other people. And I think that's a big misconception with people in 3D, is that a lot of us go into this field being, I'm a 3D artist, and we expect to have a lot of creative say in the filmmaking process. But the thing is that all of us typically work in, let's say, visual effects, in whatever it is, animation, modeling, whatever. Usually you're not going to have that creative say. You're being brought on to perform a service. Someone says, oh, I want this house painted. You're going to go paint a house. That's what you're doing. And you can always suggest some input here and there, but overall that's what we're being brought on for. Whereas I do like the fact that if you are doing more previs or animatics, I mean, that's a chance for you to actually have insight into how a shot's coming together, what's the context, all these different things that we wouldn't have outside of that. So right. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure for you find that really rewarding.
Oh, it definitely is. Yeah. It's also cool because we're so international here, probably the most international company, environment I've ever worked in. So we have people from, Japan, China, Mexico, Europe, Australia, New Zealand, and they're all coming here to work. So there's some amazing opportunities, and it's really cool to work with these artists who have all these different perspectives, and they're bringing these great ideas to the table. And for me, my job is to just help cultivate that, help be like, well, that's a really great idea. Okay, what if we did it a little bit better? And then they're jazzed because, we're just collaborating on this stuff. And that's also really exciting. So it's not just like a stereotypical, just North American point of view of how to
that's right.
Story. Yeah,
what was it like coming from, let's say, LA to Vancouver? I mean, I know the answer to this is going to be kind of underwhelming, but I'm still interested to hear it. Because, I mean, Vancouver and LA are not that different in most ways. Some ways they are. But for you, what was the experience like moving to Vancouver?
Well, I was only supposed to come up for about 4 months originally. I've been here for 4 years. So if that tells you I like it, that's pretty much it. But again, my same director friend, Kevin Monroe, he got the gig at Rainmaker Studios to do the Ratchet and Clank movie. So he's like, hey, well, to do another movie, eventually he got on the Ratchet and Clank to finish up. He's like, hey, I'm coming here to work at this company. What do you think? I'm like, sounds good to me. Let's do it,
Nice.
And a good opportunity. And, like I said, after working with them at Lucasfilm and previously on Ninja Turtles, like it made sense. So I was like, okay, cool, let's do this. And and I've been here before. I grew up near Seattle area. I know the Northwest, and I like it. It's a great area. And then just to have the opportunities up here to work on some really cool projects, I think made that more inviting for sure. So it was really easy, easy move. With lots of, people making the same transition. So you all kind of help each other and figure stuff out. How do I get a driver's license? How do I do healthcare? Healthcare is amazing. It's not that, it's like free.
Yeah, I didn't really know what to expect with healthcare and all that, like going to a doctor, and like you don't think about this stuff until you go in your country, and it's just like, well, what do I do here? And I'd actually broken my wrist just before I came to Vancouver, and I ended up like not going to a doctor, not knowing like, do I have medical or what? So I ended up just going to like the hardware store and having to buy like a pair of bolt cutters or whatever, just trying to take my cast off myself and going through that whole experience because I didn't want to have to go through any complications. But later on realizing like even for foreigners, you just go to a doctor and you're good. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah. It's it's not a perfect country, but it's really
pretty close cool. With the exception of taxes.
Yeah.
Expensive.
Yeah, it's expensive for sure. Yeah, it's not for everyone, but it was easy to make the transition. It wasn't a big deal at all, and the pace is great. Like I got a little tired of being the LA stress and the driving and all that stuff. Even from LA to San Fran was like, oh man, stress is almost gone. And then coming up here, it's like, wow, there's like I can walk to work, I can ride my bike. It's so it's green. It's like it's clean.
I love Vancouver so much. Like I was really sad to leave when I did. Like I ended up moving to Berlin, and I mean, place is beautiful. Like I was in Yaletown, as we were talking about earlier, which is like I was saying, like wherever I get flown to, like whoever flies me out, wherever they put me, it's usually where I end up. So I was cursed with like living in Yaletown. Everyone's like, "Oh, you're in Yaletown. You're one of them snobs." And then I'm like, I didn't know I was going to move to Kits, but I just stayed in Yaletown. I liked it. My favorite bar ended up being there. But then I moved to ILM and end up in the marina because that's where I ended up. And everyone's like, "Oh, you're in the marina. You're one of them." Again, it's just like, So now I got to find like the slummiest area I can stay just so I can be accepted. But Kits is nice, except that you picture the beach as being really beautiful, and you go out to the beach and there's like 3-inch waves because like all the waves coming in get all mushed up by it's like I guess Vancouver Island or Granville Island, one of them.
Yeah, it's not a surfing beach at all. No.
It's like it's a beach that you let your kids go out and a 3-year-old kid play in the waves because they're they're bigger than the waves. But yeah, I mean that's really cool. And like for you, what's your thoughts on like obviously all the growth that's happened, especially in 4 years, because it sounds like I left in 2010 and it's literally like as if I hopped on a plane and left and they're like, Psst, great, Alan's left, movie industry, come in, because it was like there was Rainmaker, there was Frantic, and there was Image Engine and maybe one more. That was it, like for visual effects. So there was no industry at all. And the minute I left, the place just blew up and became like literally the heart of the entire visual effects industry. So for you, seeing like 4 years of growth, I mean, it must have been like, unrecognizable day to day.
Yeah, it could have easily gone the other way. It could have just, spurted and flamed out, but I think, the momentum was building, more and more, studios were realizing that this is a place to do business. It's very business friendly. They're getting a lot of tax benefits and other incentives to do business here. And then the artists are coming, and then you get you build up the infrastructure. The same thing for live action. They're probably shooting 20 TV shows and 10 movies at the same time here. So now they have big sound stages and all the equipment trucks. So it's the same thing with CG. You start building an infrastructure, and then it feeds on itself, and you build the teams with the right talent, and then you start getting the projects. And but yeah, it's massive growth. It's unbelievable. Will it keep going? I don't know. I guess if they keep going the way they are, it's I think it'll stay for a while, you know.
It's definitely going to be interesting because yeah, it's fluctuated a lot, and at the same time, it is tax incentive dependent. So Australia, I was talking to someone recently about that, but like Australia, we've had tax incentives on and off for the last 2 decades. Like when it was on, we were shooting Star Wars, Matrix, a bunch of other films all at the same time there. And as soon as you take them away, everything disappears. And the interesting thing is that I'm interested to see what Vancouver's sustainability is when the incentives go away, because I do think that there's enough business there that it's kind of hard. Like it's kind of hard to let it collapse, just because like the entire industry, there's so many people there, and it is interesting too to look at Fox and a lot of other studios who are essentially saying, if you want to do any work with us, then you need to have a studio in Vancouver. It's kind of like you know, why is your business card not say LA, New York, you know, China and Vancouver? You know, it's yeah, I mean, is this one of those things that you got to keep in mind that like it's right now it's the only way to compete is to be able to shoot there because of the pricing, because of the tax incentives. But
yeah, and you know, there's lots of competition. You know, Toronto and Montreal are doing the same thing. So you know, my friends and people I work with say, "Oh, I got a job offer from Montreal or in Toronto," and you know, they're doing the same thing. So it's kind of countrywide in a way.
Yeah, Montreal was the first to just like try and pick it up right away. They're like, okay, Vancouver's doing it, we'll do it too. And I think that especially for the East Coast, it's really smart. And Toronto, you're right. Like I think that Toronto doesn't have as bigger VFX presence or post presence, but you know, there's a lot going on there film wise, and then there's a few places like Mr. X that are killing it, doing some really amazing stuff. So
right. Yeah. The talent base has grown exponentially. Yeah, the projects that are being done here are, you know, top level, of course, and it's very exciting because then you have the opportunity to meet all kinds of people that are doing all these amazing things, and you know, then it just provides more opportunity when like, hey, I know you do that thing, and you know, we could use your help, and we could use your help, and you know, it's easy to move around and you know, find the work that you need to find, or work on the things that you want to work on. You can say no to that thing because you want to say yes to this other thing, and you're not, you know, having to settle exactly.
That's right. I guess the big question is, when I pop up there, what bar are we going to?
Plural, what bars?
Yeah, good point. What was it? Yeah. There was one in Kitsilano I used to go to. I can't remember it now. It's been too long. I knew all my favorites in Yaletown, but Kits, there was a few that I went with all the frantic guys, but it's been too long now.
Yeah, probably gone under by now.
Probably. Yeah. But we'll have to organize something for sure. I'll start to wrap things up there. But I mean, for you, where can people go to find out more about you?
I have a website that I haven't updated forever, adam-3d.com. So it was just more a portfolio site to just, you know, need to look for work, which I haven't had to in a while, so I haven't updated it. But, you know, that has a lot of cool stuff from the projects of the past that I've done, and actually some of the behind the scenes on Superman, which I was able to put on there as well.
Cool.
But yeah, that's just more portfolio stuff. You know, I guess Google, I don't know.
I mean, that's a good point too, in terms of finding work and that sort of thing. I mean, I think that, you know, as you've mentioned in terms of building relationships and networking, I mean, I think the critical thing is that in the beginning, being smart about building healthy, sustainable relationships, it means that, you know, when it comes to finding work later on, I mean, most people who are more senior are not really going to need to be cutting reels and applying for work. I mean, you're leveraging the relationships you have. So, you know, I think that's a really interesting aspect that a lot of people need to be aware of, is that you do need to really care for the relationships you have and really build the healthy ones, just because in the long run, like 10 years in, let alone 20, you know, you don't want to be having to cut a reel and send it into places. You shouldn't be in a position to do that. So, I mean, the important thing is to, you know, I look at like Frantic Films, place like that. Like I loved Frantic until the day that Prime Focus, you know, embraced them and took them over. But like for me, you know, Ken and Chris were amazing to work with. I was really fond of those guys. And yeah, I mean, you want those places. Like for these days, it'd be Atomic Fiction with Kevin Bailey and Ryan, like you go to these places that you just want to continue to work for over and over and over, rather than needing to cut reels and keep applying. And so there is going to be a point where, you know, the last reel you cut is a long time ago, because you know, you don't need to go around giving out that animated business card to everyone that you meet.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's always going to be people that you haven't met with, or you know, that don't know of you. I mean, everybody knows Alan McKay, obviously, so you don't have to worry about that.
I'll slip you $5 later. Thanks for the plug.
But, you know, but I think you know, there's always that. So yeah, you may not have to sort of make that, you know, awesome reel that has to like get you that big gig as much, or really ever again. Hopefully not. But yeah, there's always something about making sure that if there is somebody you haven't worked with and they're influential, you need to present the best foot forward sort of thing, that you're still able to do that. And that's certainly valid. One of my friends who just left Rainmaker to go to work at Cinesite, he'd worked at Rainmaker for 18 years.
Wow.
He never cut a reel ever because he didn't have to. Like it was one of those rare opportunities where he was staff, and you know, they liked him so much and he liked working there, and it just worked.
Yeah.
Right? It's so rare these days. And even at Sony, those people have been there 15, 20 years, you know, and they don't have to cut reels or do anything like that because it's there. For me, it was more like I would bounce around places every year or so, 2 years, maybe 3 at the most, because I wanted a variety of experiences, you know, whether it's previs, live action, CG, commercials, you know, whatever. I never worked in games though, so I didn't need video games. But you know, that was just me. Other people they prefer that sort of stability and doing what they do and honing that craft, and that's awesome. You know, there's no wrong way about doing it. But if you're gonna be the guy that bounces around a lot, you're gonna have a little bit bigger portfolio or broader portfolio. But you still have to present it. You know, you still have to make it be like, okay, yeah, this is how I know I can do my shit.
Exactly. No, and you're absolutely right. I mean, I'm the same boat. Like I've only had like 2 staff jobs, I think maybe 3 in my entire life, probably 2, and one would have been Frantic, and before that it would have been like Ambience back in the 90s. So like for me, I get not bored very quickly, but obviously there's so many opportunities around, and I've had that where I've like missed out on really great movies like Matrix, stuff like that, because I'd agreed to some piece of crap film, you know, right before it. And you know, if you are in a position where you have opportunities, you want to go chase them rather than trusting in just like whatever's coming through the door at the place that you're at. But yeah, no, I think that's really solid advice.
But you shouldn't let that get you down. That goes because maybe you missed out on one thing and you work on a shittier project. But every project shapes who you are, and if you can, you know, have the attitude of learning the most you can from that and doing the best work you can from it, even though it's, you know, kind of a, you know, less desirable project, I guess. But like as a brief side story to that, like I'd finished up Storks at Sony, so Warner Brothers film again, you know, new property. It was cool, like to do something that was really fresh and a sort of goofball movie about storks that deliver babies, but they have a factory like Amazon, you know. Really funny. But they didn't have another CG film lined up. It got delayed. The one I'm working on now, Smallfoot. And so in the meantime, they had this movie called Meg, this giant shark movie with Jason Statham. And so I was like, hey, you want to work on this visual effects? I'm like, I'm kind of tired of doing visual effects, but let's see what I can learn from it, you know. And I learned a lot. It was awesome. You know, I don't know what the movie is, how it's going to do, whatever, but it was a really interesting experience. And, you know, working again with live action plates and match move, you know, CG stunt doubles and, you know, all that stuff. You know, so yeah, it wasn't maybe my preferred thing to do, but again, taking that advice of like, let's learn from this and see how I grow from it.
What's the state of the film right now? Because I haven't been following it at all, but I used to work with Mike Janov. You probably know Mike, right? Yeah. From back in the day, from Autodesk days. And yeah, so like we were always joking. In fact, I named a tool called Shark Octopus something or other. Anyway, like this is like 2011. This is like when all the big monster movies are coming out. Like a lot of the Korean monster movies where it'd be a combination of, let's say, a giant shark mixed with something else versus a giant whale. Who the hell knows? You know, and it's just like all these ridiculous things were just piling up. And Meg, I'm sure, is short for Magdalenian, which, you know, is I'm guessing. But again, it was just like it would be Megdaloni and the giant shark versus the giant squid, or all these kind of crazy things. So I don't know much about Meg at all, but as soon as I heard the title, I'm just like, oh yeah, I'm totally doing it. I got to see this.
Yeah, you can like Wikipedia the history of it. It's kind of fascinating. It's based on a book series that was written around the Jurassic Park time that Michael Crichton was in. So they were trying to make this movie, 20 odd years ago, because that's, Jurassic Park, monster things, and that was, it's like Jurassic Park underwater, basically. The scientist, he goes down and they inadvertently open this trench, which lets loose this prehistoric shark, and havoc. Wreaks havoc, of course, and all that. So it's based on this book, and they take some movies obviously with it, but it's it's man versus shark.
The sad part is that Piranha 3D and Sharknado had to come along to get this movie greenlit.
They ended up it's done. They ended up delaying it, so it's not going to get released until later in the year. But we finished it off, and it looks amazing. The effects
cool. So I think you got to have those goofy movies once in a while. It's
Yeah, I mean, we're laughing at all the time. You're like, this is so ridiculous, but somebody's going to think it's pretty amazing too. So it's that balance between like, we're doing some funny stuff.
You Stratham in there, so you eventually do a crossover of the Expendables versus King Kong or something. I don't know. See what happens. But cool, man. Well, I'll wrap things up. But again, this has been really awesome, man. So thanks again for taking the time to chat.
Yeah, thank you. It's awesome to catch up and keep doing what you're doing. It's a really help to the industry, and personally I appreciate it, and I'm sure a lot of other people do. So.
Okay, again, I want to thank Adam for taking the time to chat. I really enjoyed this episode, and I hope you got a lot from it as well. If you want to check out the show notes, go to alanmckay.com/141, which is episode 141. And as I mentioned, if you want to check out the free high-end visual effects training that I just put out that's only available till June 8th, go to alanmckay.com/energyball, and you'll be able to get access to it there. Okay, so that is it for now. I'm going to be back next week. I'm going to be speaking with Kat Evans, who's been on the podcast before. We did a really big episode, and we got into so many different subjects, and we ended up talking for I think it was 3.5, 4 hours. It was intense. There's a few bathroom breaks in between. So that was really cool, and I wanted to break it up because I wanted these to be super specific. So one of the things that we talked about in the past was women in visual effects, and I think that was a really important subject to get into. But in addition to that, we also talked about her leaving the visual effects industry after almost 15 years. For anyone not familiar, Kat Evans is Neil Blevins' wife. Neil, up until now, has been working at Pixar for almost 15 years as well, at least 10 years, I think. And so those two also have a daughter, and I think there's just a really interesting dynamic talking about a lot of the things that don't get discussed, like burnout, leaving the industry. That was a really interesting one. But then with her, talking about how she got into the industry and a lot of the kind of key insights that she's had over her 15 years in here, and getting to work on a lot of really amazing projects for a lot of really big studios. Obviously, she's worked at ILM for quite a long time on a lot of really big projects. And she just has a lot of really great advice. So I wanted to break it up into 3 separate episodes. And this is the last one, which will be more focused on her career and a lot of the advice and other things that she wants to share as well. So that episode is coming up next, which is episode 142. All right, so until then, rock on.